On a day meant for gratitude and family unity, a mother arrived at her daughter's home, only to be turned away from the very table she once sacrificed everything to provide. What unfolded that Thanksgiving night was not a celebration, but a curse that tore a family apart forever. The bus rumbled along the highway, its windows fogged with the breath of tired travelers. At the very back, pressed against the cold glass, sat Miriam, a woman in her late 60s. Her wrinkled hands clutched a small handbag, worn at the edges but carefully kept. Inside was not food, not gifts, not anything that might impress a crowd, only a hand-knitted scarf she had made for her daughter. Angela, weeks before, Miriam's heart beat with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. It was Thanksgiving, the day families came together. She remembered the warmth of old days when her late husband, George, would carve the turkey while Angela, then just a little girl with golden braids, would laugh and sneak bites of pie before dinner. Those memories kept her alive. They gave her hope. Now Angela was grown, married, with her own family, her own home. Miriam hadn't been invited outright this year. No letter, no warm phone call, but a short, almost reluctant text. You can come if you want, but remember, it's a potluck. The words had stung. They carried no warmth, no longing. But Miriam told herself not to take it to heart. Maybe Angela was stressed. Maybe it was just the way young people spoke now, short, clipped, efficient. Still, the line, "bring something," echoed in her head. She didn't have much. Her pension barely covered rent and medicine. She couldn't afford to carry pies, turkey, or fancy wine like others. She had only herself and the scarf she had made. Her eyes watered as she whispered, "Maybe it's enough. Maybe love is enough." The bus hissed to a stop. The small town was alive with Thanksgiving bustle, families carrying bags of groceries, children skipping with balloons, cars lined up outside bakeries. Miriam stepped off, her frail figure almost swallowed by the rush around her. She began the long walk toward Angela's house, her scarf tucked carefully under her arm. The house loomed at the end of Maple Street. Lights glowed warmly from inside, laughter spilled out through the windows. Miriam's heart leapt. This was family, this was belonging. She quickened her pace, but as she reached the door, she froze. Through the glass, she could see Angela, radiant and smiling, greeting guests with hugs. Plates of food were being set on a grand table. Miriam could smell the roasted turkey, the cinnamon pies, the buttered rolls. She lifted her hand to knock, hesitated, and then knocked softly. Angela opened the door. For a moment, her smile held, then faltered. "Mom," she said flatly, her voice devoid of joy. "You made it." Miriam smiled nervously, clutching the scarf. "Of course, darling. I wouldn't miss Thanksgiving." Angela's eyes scanned her mother's empty hands. No dishes, no pies, no casserole. Just that small hand-knitted scarf. The silence between them was sharp, heavy. Finally, Angela sighed and stepped aside. "Well, come in." As Miriam entered, she felt the shift in the air. Laughter dimmed. Heads turned. Some smiled politely, others whispered. She could feel it, the weight of being unwanted. She swallowed hard and whispered to herself, "It's just my imagination. She loves me. She has to love me." The living room glowed with golden light, filled with warmth and chatter. Families had gathered around the long oak table decorated with pumpkins, candles, and bowls overflowing with food. Laughter echoed as plates clattered and wine glasses touched in cheerful toast. Miriam stood by the doorway, her small frame almost invisible among the bustling crowd. She smoothed the scarf in her lap, her only gift, waiting for a moment when Angela might notice her. Angela floated gracefully around the room, her smile wide, her voice bright as she hugged friends and neighbors. She leaned in close to a woman who had brought a steaming casserole, exclaiming loudly, "This is exactly the tradition. Everyone brings something. It makes the table richer, fuller." Her words stung Miriam, though Angela's eyes never met her mother's. Miriam shifted uncomfortably, her stomach already aching from hunger. She had eaten only a piece of bread that morning to save her appetite for this moment. She had dreamed of warm turkey, mashed potatoes, pumpkin pie. More than food, she had dreamed of sitting among them, laughing, being seen not as a burden but as family. Dinner was announced. Everyone hurried to the table, filling chairs with chatter and excitement. Miriam trailed behind, unsure where to sit. She saw an empty seat near the end, but as she approached, a cousin slipped into it with a laugh, leaving her standing. Finally, she found a chair at the very edge, nearly pushed against the wall. She sat quietly, her hands folded in her lap. Plates clattered as dishes passed from hand to hand. Turkey, stuffing, cranberry sauce, rolls dripping with butter. The scents filled Miriam's nose until her mouth watered. She reached out timidly when a platter of turkey slid near, but before she could take a piece, Angela's voice cut sharply across the table. "Mom," Angela said, her tone cool but loud enough for everyone to hear. "What did you bring?" The table hushed. All eyes turned to Miriam. Her heart pounded. She opened her bag and slowly lifted the scarf, its soft wool trembling in her hands. I brought this. I made it for you. I thought." Angela's lips curled into a strained smile, but her words were knives. "This is a potluck, Mom. Everyone else brought food. You didn't bring anything for the table." The silence was unbearable. A guest coughed. Another shifted in their chair. No one spoke. Miriam's eyes blurred with tears. She placed the scarf back into her lap, her hands shaking. I didn't know what else I could." Angela leaned back, her voice icy. "Then maybe you should just sit and watch. Food is for those who contribute." The words struck like a blow. Miriam's chest tightened, her breath caught. She lowered her gaze, ashamed, while the plates of food continued to pass her by. Skipping her hands as though she were invisible, she sat hungry as the feast unfolded before her eyes. The laughter returned. Louder now, but it no longer felt warm. It rang hollow, cruel, a reminder that she was an outsider at her own daughter's table. Inside, something cracked. Even as a mother, I am nothing here, Miriam thought bitterly. The day I gave her life, I gave her everything. And today, she denies me bread. Tears slipped silently down her cheeks. She wiped them quickly, hoping no one would notice. But in her heart, a storm was rising, the kind of storm that only a mother's broken heart could summon. The night outside was cold, but inside the house, the heat of food and chatter pressed against Miriam like a suffocating blanket. She sat silently at the end of the table, her plate still empty. The scarf, her simple, humble gift, lay folded in her lap. Forgotten. Every now and then her stomach growled, but it was not hunger that ached the most. It was the sharp, gnawing pain of rejection. Angela laughed loudly at a guest's joke. She leaned over to refill her husband's glass, then complimented her neighbor's pie. Not once did she look at Miriam. Not once did she offer her mother a piece of bread. I am invisible, Miriam thought. In my own child's house, I am nothing but a shadow. Her hands trembled. She clenched them tightly together until her knuckles turned white. The voices around her blurred into noise, the kind that drowns the heart. In her silence, words formed, not spoken aloud, but whispered deep inside her soul. If a mother's love is not enough, then let her tears be remembered. If you deny me food at your table, may you one day learn the taste of emptiness. If you push me away in life, may you feel the weight of loneliness when you most crave warmth. It was not a curse shouted in anger. It was softer, heavier, like a prayer twisted with sorrow. The kind of words that rise unbidden from a broken heart. Miriam's tears dropped silently into her lap. No one noticed. But something shifted in the air, an unseen shadow creeping into the golden light of the room. The feast continued, but small cracks began to appear. The turkey burned slightly as Angela busied herself with conversation. A child spilled wine on the tablecloth, staining the white fabric deep red. Arguments flared quietly between cousins over who would sit where. It was subtle, almost invisible at first. But Miriam felt it. Her sorrow had seeped into the walls. Later, when the guests began to leave, the warmth that had filled the house earlier seemed to vanish. Laughter turned into tired sighs, and conversations ended with irritation rather than joy. Angela, still oblivious, stood by the door bidding her guests goodbye. But her smile was thin, forced. Something had changed. When the door finally closed and silence fell, Angela turned back toward the dining room. The mess of dishes, stains, and half-eaten food stared back at her like a battlefield. Her husband muttered under his breath, annoyed at her for not managing things better. Her children had slipped upstairs without helping. Leaving her alone with the chaos. She felt a strange emptiness in her chest. For the first time that day, she looked toward the corner of the table toward her mother, but Miriam was gone. The chair was empty. The scarf, however, remained, draped carefully across the seat as though left behind on purpose. Angela picked it up slowly. The wool was soft, the stitches neat. It carried the faint scent of lavender, the kind her mother always kept in her drawers. A lump formed in Angela's throat, but she pushed it down, muttering, "She should have brought food." That's what Thanksgiving is about. Yet her voice trembled as she said it, and the house around her seemed colder than before. That night, Angela tossed and turned in her bed. She dreamed of her mother's face lined with sorrow, wet with tears, and of the scarf abandoned on the chair. In her dream, she saw her mother walking alone down a dark road, shivering in the cold, her hands empty. Angela awoke with a start, her chest tight, her breath shallow. She looked to her side. Her husband was snoring, distant, turned away from her. The house was silent, but it no longer felt like home. It felt cursed. And deep inside, Angela knew, whether she admitted it or not, that her mother's pain was not just hers to carry anymore. It would follow the family. The morning after Thanksgiving was gray, the sky heavy with clouds. Angela moved slowly through her kitchen, her body weary, her mind restless. The once grand table now looked like a ruin, dirty plates stacked high, crumbs scattered, wine stains spread like scars across the tablecloth. She rubbed her temples, replaying the night in her head. The laughter, the food, the guests, it should have been perfect. And yet, every time she closed her eyes, she saw her mother's face, those eyes wet with tears. That trembling smile quickly hidden. The scarf left behind, like a silent accusation. Angela clutched it in her hands now. The stitches were uneven in places, evidence of hours spent by frail fingers. She held it to her chest, and for the first time the thought pierced her heart. She had nothing else to give. And I turned her away. The memory of her own words echoed, cruel and sharp. Food is for those who contribute. Angela's throat tightened. She remembered being a child, waking to the smell of her mother's cooking on cold mornings. Remembered the nights Miriam had gone without so Angela could eat. Remembered the hands that worked late shifts, the voice that sang her to sleep, and yet when the moment came to honor her, she had humiliated her. Angela sank into a chair, burying her face in her hands. The house felt empty, though her family was upstairs. It was the emptiness of a bond broken, of love betrayed. Far across town, Miriam sat alone in her tiny apartment. A small lamp glowed beside her, its light dim. She had not eaten since yesterday. Her stomach was empty, but worse, her soul was hollow. She folded her hands in her lap and whispered a prayer. Not for revenge, not even for justice, but for peace. For her heart to quiet, for her tears to dry. Yet as she prayed, her voice broke. Even in old age, a mother only wants to belong. Is it too much, Lord, to be wanted at your child's table? The room answered with silence. Days passed, but the curse lingered. Angela felt it in the way her children grew restless, snapping at one another. She felt it in her husband's silence, in the heaviness of the air. Meals tasted bland, laughter rang hollow. One evening, unable to bear it any longer, she wrapped herself in a coat and clutched the scarf. She walked the familiar road to her mother's apartment, her steps hesitant, her heart pounding. When she reached the door, she raised her hand to knock, but stopped. What if her mother refused to see her? What if the door never opened? Tears welled as she stood there, trembling. Finally, she knocked. The door creaked open. Miriam stood there, frail and tired, her eyes red from sleepless nights. For a moment, silence hung heavy between them. Angela's lips parted. Words struggled to come. Mom, I shouldn't have said those things. I shouldn't have... Her voice cracked. You gave me everything, and I denied you a seat at my table. Miriam's eyes glistened, but she said nothing. She simply looked at her daughter, the silence more painful than any words. Angela held out the scarf with shaking hands. You left this behind. I don't deserve it. But I can't keep it, not unless you forgive me. Miriam touched the scarf but did not take it. She whispered, her voice thin. A mother can forgive, but forgetting is harder. Angela broke into sobs, collapsing into her mother's frail arms. The embrace was weak, uncertain, but it was there. And yet, even as they stood in that doorway, something remained broken. The wound might scar, but it would never heal fully. That year, Thanksgiving did not bring gratitude. It brought sorrow. It became a day remembered not for feasts, but for a fracture. The day Thanksgiving became a curse between mother and daughter. This was the story of a Thanksgiving that became a curse between mother and daughter. Haunting reminder that love unacknowledged becomes sorrow. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more emotional teles. And remember, sometimes the simplest act of kindness can save a bond from breaking forever.